Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York. I'm William Denslow and these are the top stories of the hour. The world begins ushering in 2022 after another pandemic-ridden year capped by new restrictions, soaring case numbers and a slight glimmer of hope for better times ahead. New pediatric COVID hospitalizations have hit a record high in the United States as the US National Guard deployed to support overwhelmed hospital staff. England is building temporary hospitals to help cope with rising coronavirus cases, as Prime Minister Boris Johnson issued a stark warning to those that are not fully vaccinated. South Africa says its latest coronavirus wave has peaked without a surge in deaths or hospitalisations, enabling the country to lift a nightly curfew for the first time in 21 months. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned his US counterpart Joe Biden in a call that new Western sanctions against Russia could rupture ties between Moscow and Washington and would be a big mistake. Tesla is recalling nearly 500,000 electric vehicles because of problems with the trunk that increases crash risks. Fast-moving wildfires in the US state of Colorado destroyed hundreds of homes and forced at least 33,000 people to flee as flames tear through areas desiccated by a historic drought. It's 2022 already. Some parts of the world have already rung in the new year with fireworks and countdowns, while others are heading into a slightly less celebratory New Year's Eve and a bumpy weekend too. Especially the United States, which is swept by an unprecedented spike in COVID-19 cases. Hospitals have been crushed under the fast-spreading Omicron variant, and this is happening across the country. Record case counts are being reported from New Jersey, New York, Arkansas, Chicago, Arizona and New Mexico. Several major health systems have reported a 100 to 200% jump in hospitalisations, with most patients unvaccinated. The federal government has deployed members of the National Guard to help support the overwhelmed staff. Hospital staff strength has also shrunk due to positive COVID-19 cases amongst them. The deployed soldiers and airmen will be working in non-clinical roles like transportation patients, security, collecting test samples and patient observation.
It's a combination of both COVID patients and non-COVID patients. On top of that, staffing is becoming an issue because a lot of our caregivers are becoming ill and they're out either taking care of themselves or taking care of family members. So it's put an additional strain on our caregivers here within our organization, so we've requested the assistance of the National Guard to come in and help.
Everything's non-clinical. The type of support that we're offering is patient transport. We will be stocking shelves, being greeters, offering as security, patient observers, and for the EMS side, it's driving ambulances.
And paediatric hospital admissions are the highest the US has seen over the course of the pandemic. According to some estimates, paediatric hospitalisations rose on average nearly 50% in the past week. In the week ending December 23rd, almost 199,000 children reported infected with COVID. The figure is up 50% over that of the previous month. The presidents of the United States and Russia have engaged verbal warnings once again. Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin held a 50-minute-long telephone conversation. There were warnings of sanctions and severe consequences. Both leaders restated their positions on Ukraine. After the phone call was over, the Kremlin says that new sanctions could completely rupture the existing ties between both countries.
Мы не знаем, что предполагает, что такое масштабные санкции, мы тоже не знаем. Но мы знаем, что это будет колоссальная ошибка, которая может привести к самым серьезным последствиям. Но надеемся, что этого не будет. Но с этой целью мы, собственно, и мы, и американцы, и другие западные страны начинают переговорный процесс по 3 трекам.
However, both America and Russia have expressed optimism over the latest phone call between the leaders.
The United States and Russia exchanged warnings over Ukraine on Thursday, but remained optimistic that talks in the new year could ease spiraling tensions. In a nearly 1-hour call, U.S. President Joe Biden told his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, that he needed to see Russia de-escalate its recent military buildup near Ukraine, and threatened unprecedented sanctions if Russia chose to invade its neighbor. Putin said sanctions from Washington and its allies could rupture diplomatic ties. After the call, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said in a statement, quote, President Biden reiterated that substantive progress in these dialogues can occur only in an environment of de-escalation rather than escalation. Thursday's call was the second this month between the two leaders and was requested by Putin. An aide to the Kremlin said Putin was optimistic the meeting created a good backdrop for future talks. Officials on both sides described the tone of the call as serious, without any significant progress towards a resolution. The exchange sets the stage for lower-level engagement between the countries in January, including a U.S.-Russia security meeting, a Russia-NATO session, and a broader global conference.
Iran has carried out a new space launch to send 3 research devices into space. Iranian state television showed footage of what it said was the firing of the launch vehicle. Defence Ministry spokesperson Ahmad Hosseini identified the rocket as a Simorgh, or Phoenix rocket. He said that the 3 devices were sent up 470 kilometres and said that an operational launch could take place soon. As the research goal foreseen, this launch were achieved. Iran has seen one of the biggest missile programmes in the Middle East. But Iran has suffered a series of setbacks in its space programme in recent launches. No one immediately said if the objects launched in this attempt to reach orbit.
برای اولین بار ما عملکرد 500 ثانیه‌ای موتور مرحله دوم رو تو شرایط خلا و تو فضا داشتیم. ماهواره گرون قیمت نصب نکرده بودیم روی این ماهواره بر و عرض کردم 3 محموله تحقیقاتی ارزون قیمت بود و تقریبا به 100% اهدافی که مد نظرمون بود تو این پرتاب دست پیدا کردیم و به نقطه‌ای رسیدیم که انشالله میتونیم در آینده نزدیک بعد از این کار مقدماتی که انجام شد انشالله کار اصلی انجام بشه و ماهواره عملیاتی مد نظر ماهواره سازامون رو
In April 2020, Tehran successfully put its first military satellite into orbit. Earlier this month, US media had reported that preparations for a launch were underway at Iran's Semnan Space Center. In February, Iran had announced it had launched its most powerful solid-fuel rocket to date, the Soljanar. The rocket put a 220-kilogram payload into orbit. The United States voiced concern about that launch, saying the test could boost Iran's ballistic missile technology, at a time when the two nations are inching back towards diplomacy. Washington has also raised concern after the latest launch, saying that such moves show the need to revive a 2015 nuclear deal. Washington is worried over whether the technology used to launch satellites could advance Iran's ballistic missile development. The US State Department says that Iran's development of space launch vehicles pose a significant proliferation concern. Iran insists its space program is for civilian and defence purposes, and that it does not breach the nuclear deal or any other international agreement. But the US State Department officials contend that Iran's nuclear program is effectively constrained by the JCPOA, Iran's new space launch comes when talks are underway in Vienna to restore the 2015 nuclear agreement. The parties to the 2015 agreement with Iran saw it as the best way to stop Tehran from building a nuclear bomb. Shifting our focus to China's national security law and its impact on Hong Kong. The arrested journalists from the pro-democracy news outlet Stand News have been denied bail. The former editors, who have been charged with sedition, were arrested on Wednesday after police raided the news agency's office. Police charged the outlet's two editors, Chung Pyo-Kuen and Patrick Lam, for allegedly conspiring to publish seditious materials. The court, however, has granted police bail to the other detained members of the media outlet. The developments came a day after Stand News said that it would cease all its operations. The statement was made after hundreds of Hong Kong police raided its offices on Wednesday and detained some of its staff members. Rights activists and some Western governments have criticised the raid as a sign of further erosion of press freedoms in the region. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has also condemned the latest closure of the media outlet. He called on Chinese and Hong Kong authorities to cease targeting the region's free and independent media. China, meanwhile, has lashed out at the West for their criticisms regarding the arrest of the Hong Kong journalists. During a media briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said that some external forces, under the guise of media freedoms, are making irresponsible remarks about the law enforcement in Hong Kong and defaming China.
任何国家和组织以及个人都无权干预香港事务。一些外部势力打着所谓新闻自由的幌子，对香港特区依法开展执法，说三道四，完全是颠倒黑白，混淆视听。
Since the imposition of the national security law, critics of the Chinese Communist Party have repeatedly targeted by Hong Kong officials. Stand News was one of the last pro-democracy media outlets in the region, after the pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily was forced to shut its doors earlier this year. Moving on to the Horn of Africa nation of Sudan now, where at least 4 anti-coup protesters have been shot dead by Sudanese security forces during an anti-coup demonstration. The deadly incident took place near the capital city of Khartoum after 11 straight days of protests.
Security forces fired tear gas at protesters in Sudan's capital Khartoum on Thursday, footage has showed. The demonstrators were attempting to march towards the presidential palace on what is the 11th day of major demonstrations since an October 25th coup. The military takeover saw civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok removed and then reinstated. Protesters have since been repeatedly out in force to demand that the military plays no role in the government during a transition to free elections. On Saturday, they reached near to the presidential palace, despite heavy tear gas and a communications blackout. Internet and mobile services again appeared to be disrupted on Thursday. A source at one telecoms company said an order had come from state-owned Sudan National Telecommunications Corporation for internet services to be shut down. In the streets, several young men wore gloves so that they could throw back tear gas canisters and stun grenades. A witness said tear gas was fired towards crowds near a bridge connecting Khartoum to the city of Bari, directly to the north. Protesters there could be heard chanting, "As much as we sacrifice and die, we won't be ruled by the boot."
A dramatic standoff between Rohingya refugees and the Indonesian Navy has ended with an 18-hour-long rescue operation. A boat carrying over 100 Rohingya refugees, mostly women and children, was allowed to dock in Indonesia amid heavy rains and high seas. The boat disembarked after Indonesian authorities relented after international pressure to provide refuge.
A boat that had been stranded with more than 100 Rohingya Muslims on board was allowed to dock in Indonesia early on Friday. The refugees include pregnant women and children and had been adrift off the country's west coast on what many had warned was a sinking vessel. Only after international pressure did Indonesian authorities relent and allow it to dock. The refugees were sprayed with disinfectant as they left the boat and boarded a bus in heavy rain. Oktina Havanti, an official at the UNHCR, said they will now be kept in quarantine for up to 14 days and undergo health checks. Local fishermen first spotted the boat off the coast of Aceh province on Sunday. They delivered food and water to the Rohingya, who were crammed on board the wooden skiff. Indonesian authorities initially planned to turn them away, but changed their minds after warnings about the condition of the boat and calls from international rights groups to let the boat dock. The Rohingya have fled persecution in Myanmar for years, sailing to countries such as Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia. Many have been turned away, at times after spending months at sea. Indonesia is not a signatory to the UN Convention on Refugees and is predominantly seen as a transit country for those seeking asylum.
South Africans queued up outside the St George's Cathedral in Cape Town as Archbishop Desmond Tutu's body arrived for funeral. A requiem mass funeral service will be held for the anti-apartheid icon on January 1st.
In a simple pine coffin, the mortal remains of Archbishop Desmond Tutu arrived at his final resting place on Thursday. The anti-apartheid icon will lie in state at Cape Town's St George's Cathedral, ahead of his funeral at the weekend. South Africans formed long queues outside the church from the early hours for their chance to bid farewell to the man known as Tata, or Father. Among them was Cape Town resident Mamelo Letsupa.
Always used his voice to the benefit of others, to the benefit that are, on the sidelines of society. So I'm here to commemorate that, to pay my respects.
Tutu died on Sunday, aged 90. The Nobel laureate had requested the cheapest coffin and did not want any lavish funeral expense. A requiem mass funeral service will be held on Saturday, where President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to deliver a eulogy. The cathedral, where Tutu served as the first black Archbishop of Cape Town, was a safe haven for anti-apartheid activists during repressive white minority rule. Tutu will be cremated and his remains interred behind the pulpit, from which he often preached against racial injustice.
Tesla is recalling almost 500,000 electric cars. The step's been taken to address rear-view camera and trunk issues. Experts say the issues have increased the risk of crashing. However, Tesla says that the company is not aware of any crashes, injuries or deaths related to the issues.
Tesla is recalling almost 500,000 electric cars to address rear-view camera and trunk issues that increase the risk of crashing. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said Tesla is recalling more than 350,000 Model 3s over the rear-view camera issues and nearly 120,000 Model S vehicles due to front hood latch problems, which Tesla said may lead a trunk to open, quote, without warning and obstruct the driver's visibility, increasing the risk of a crash. The federal regulator also said that Tesla is not aware of any crashes, injuries, or deaths related to the issues with its Model 3 and Model S cars. The model years affected in the recall range from 2014 to 2021, and the total number of recalled vehicles is close to the 500,000 vehicles Tesla delivered last year. Tesla could not be reached for comment. The U.S. road safety regulator is investigating Tesla over other issues too, including its autopilot system and its decision to allow video games to be played on car screens while in motion. Tesla has subsequently agreed to stop allowing video games to be played while cars are moving. Shares of Tesla fell as much as 3% in early trading Thursday, but rebounded, turning positive by midday.
Over 500,000 individuals in the United States are homeless. In Los Angeles, there are more than 80,000 people who do not have a house. To combat the growing humanitarian crisis, LA is now creating publicly funded tiny villages with tiny homes to temporarily house individuals. Our next report brings you more.
This is the Chandler Tiny Home Village in North Hollywood in LA. A village with homes especially for the homeless. Inaugurated in February 2021 with 39 homes and 85 beds. And it now serves as a blueprint for other housing projects across America. These 8x8 structures are equipped with daily necessities. The villages are under 24-hour surveillance to ensure safety of residents. Residents are checked at the entry points to prevent drugs and weapons from entering the establishment. And there is also a curfew in place from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
This piece of property was an underutilized piece of park space. It was frequently blighted with illegal dumping and encampments and so on. So what you see now in its place is a beautifully managed, attractive facility that not only provides temporary emergency housing and services and daily meals and everything else for the people who live here, but it's really an improvement for the surrounding community over what they had as well. And if communities understand that, they'll be much more supportive of the kinds of solutions that cities need to implement in order to address homelessness.
In LA, there are over 80,000 homeless people. Those without a home can go to their nearest tiny village now, where they are assigned a case manager. They're offered job training, placement assistance, and a house navigator who can help them find a permanent home. There are also provisions for mental health and substance abuse services. These innovative and affordable homes can be set up in about 3 months, and the homes are rather easy to erect as well, making this a quick and affordable housing option. More than that, it finally gives the homeless an address for filling out forms, claiming services, and receiving mail.
We realize this is not the solution, but it is part of the solution to address the homeless and humanitarian crisis, not just here in Los Angeles, but across the world. Why? Because these particular units can be deployed and they can be set up, they can be put together in an hour's time. And once they are put up, now somebody actually has an emergency house with temperature controls, with a bed, a front door that locks. So we know the value of bringing people indoors.
Beyond all the surfaces, these homes offer hope and an escape from the ponderous chains of poverty, alienation from society, and financial woes. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
The New Year's Eve chimes and fireworks have begun. Major cities across the world have already welcomed the new year, 2022, with iconic fireworks and traditional countdown events. We leave you with celebrations. Stay tuned to catch all the welcome celebration visuals, only on WION. Thanks for watching.
This is right, Arab.